Well, this morning we're continuing our sermon series entitled Portraits of Faith. Now, I've just got to draw attention to Miss Marcia. Miss Marcia does such a good job of trying to connect her children's message with the scripture passage we're using in the day. And today we're preaching about Rahab the prostitute. And Marcia's been wrestling with that all week. And I was wondering what you were going to do with it. Very good, Marcia. Justin and I may not be quite as discreet, but as we look at Rahab, the story of Rahab, actually the first part of the message, I'm going to kind of be walking you through the story. It's another rather long story, but I think an important one for us to focus on. As we look at Rahab, it identifies that she is a prostitute. We first read about her in Joshua chapter 2, but we also can read about her in Matthew, in the lineage of Joseph, Jesus's earthly father. We find Rahab in that lineage. Also, we find Rahab mentioned in the Hall of Faith in Hebrews chapter 11, and it's because of her faith that God delivered her even when she didn't understand all that was going to happen. And also in the book of James, she again is identified as Rahab the prostitute. But it's an issue that at that point she is commended for her righteousness in the book of James. So, I believe that this story that we're going to look at today in the life of Rahab is an important story in her journey of faith. I don't think it's an issue that she has completely arrived. I don't know that this, whether this was the start of her journey, but I certainly don't believe that it was the end of her journey. And there are some who try to explain away what her profession may have been as a prostitute. Some will say, well, she was just an innkeeper. But I think most scholars agree that it was an issue that she had the oldest profession in the world, and she was a prostitute selling herself for the sexual pleasure of others. There's no denying that prostitution was what she did. However, God still used her. Even in her brokenness, God still used her. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself, but as I tell this story, I want to give a little bit of background, of a reminder of where this story fits. First of all, Moses delivered the children of Israel out of slavery and bondage in Egypt. And then as he led them out of Egypt, God parted the Red Sea and they walked across on dry land. There were battles that they won, victories that God had given them. Moses, when they reached the promised land, Moses sent 12 spies in. And those spies were to check out the promised land, to go in and check it out. It's something that countries and nations continue to do today. In sending spies into a land to try and figure out their strengths, trying to figure out what's going on there. Although today, in addition to the CIA and special ops forces, they also have satellites and radars and all sorts of things that nations are finding out about one another. But in this day, boots on the ground, sending spies into the land was really the only way to figure out what was going on there. So Moses had sent 12 spies. They were to check out, they were to find out where the strongholds were. Did they lock the gates of the city at night? What was the water supply? Because if they could cut off the water supply, that was a way that would push them to surrender. How many people lived there? How many How many people seemed to be there of men of fighting age? What sort of weapons did they have to have? It was an issue before they went into battle of counting the cost and figuring out, can we win this battle or not? You remember the story that as Moses sent the 12 spies, 10 of them came back and said, oh, they're like giants. We're only grasshoppers in their sight. The land is rich with resources. It's flowing with milk and honey, but we are weak. There is no way that we can win that battle. Now, that's what the report of 10 spies, but there were 2 spies, Joshua and Caleb. They came back and they said, no, because God has told us to do this. God will give us the victory. Even though we may seem to be the underdogs, we can do this because that's what God has told us to do. Well, in the end, the 10 spies won out. And because of Moses listening to the 10 spies, the children of Israel wandered around in the desert for 40 years. They wandered around in the desert until that generation had died. And then even Moses had died, and he passed the baton of leadership on to Joshua. Joshua was that next generation leader. He was Moses' successor. And the new generation leader, he was to lead them into the promised land. But Joshua remembered what had happened 40 years ago, so he didn't send 12 spies this time. He didn't publicize that he was sending spies out. But as we come to Joshua chapter 2, verse 1, it says that Joshua, secretly sent 2 spies to go and check out the land. So they checked out the land, but they paid particular attention to Jericho. The reason they paid particular attention to Jericho was a key spot that gave them access to a larger area in the promised land. If they didn't control Jericho, they would have hindrances of getting into the rest of the land. So it was important that they control Jericho. So as they entered the city, it says that they went to the house of a prostitute named Rahab. Now, I don't know about you, but I wonder, why did the spies go to the house of a prostitute? Kind of wondering what their motivation is. They went to town. But, I think one of the things in that day, when visitors came to a town, when foreigners came to a town, when spies came to a town, often the place they went was a prostitute's house. And so that would have been common. That would have been a place where strangers commonly would have come and gone. But also, this is a place that God had directed them to go. It would have been a place where visitors of a town, or in this case, spies, would be less likely to attract attention because strangers of the city were always coming and going from the home of a prostitute. Well, as we go on in verse 2, word got to the king that there were spies. And so the king sends his messengers to try and find the spies. And where does he send them first? To the prostitute's house. Now, were they following these men? Did they know that they were there? Or was it just the fact that that's normally where people that are not familiar with the city, it's a place that they would go. So that would be the place where the king's messengers would start to see if they could find the spies. And Rahab had hidden the 2 men, but she told the king's messengers that the men had come to her, but she had sent them on their way, and they were already headed out of town. Now, Rahab told a lie. There's no indication that God told her to lie, but that was a part of the culture and the expectation of that day, that it was okay to lie. So why did she do it? Well, she did it because she was trying to help out the situation. But I think even if she would not have lied, God would have found a way to protect the spies, and they would have been saved in their mission. As we go on to verse 6, Rahab has taken the spies to the roof and hidden them under some stalks of flax. Now, there's a process that with flax that they will soak it in water for several days, and then they'll dry it on the roof, and after it's dried, they're able to get the fibers out, and they use that fiber to weave fine linen. And so as that process is going on, it would have been pretty messy on the roof. It would not have been a pleasant place to be, and some even describe it as they were laying under that flax. It would have been like they were in some sort of pig slop. The king's messengers didn't search Rahab's house, but they believed Rahab, and so the king's messengers, they rushed out to see if they could catch up with this in pursuit of the spies. Rahab went up and talked to the spies, and she gave them some information that they were looking for. One of the things that she said that was one of the things the spies were wanting to know was the competence level of the people. And she told them that the people of Jericho feared the children of Israel. Now, just as Israel had sent spies into the city of Jericho, Jericho probably had also sent spies to the Israelite encampment. They knew that they were only a few miles out of the city, and they had heard stories about how God had delivered them through the Red Sea, how God had given them victory in battle. And because of God being on Israel's side, Jericho was fearful, no matter how strong they were, that they could not prevail against Israel's army. And it wasn't that they were afraid of Israel, but they were fearful because of the power of their God. In verse 12, Rahab asks the spies to make a promise to show kindness to her and her family as they come back and conquer the city. The spies promised that they would save the lives of Rahab and her family, as long as she didn't double cross them and tip off the king of their plans. Rahab helped the spies sneak out of the city by lowering them on a rope outside of her home, which was in the wall of the city. There was a window there, and she lowers them down. Told them to go into the hill country and hide for 3 days, and that would give those who were pursuing them time to come back to the city, and then they could go on their way, or the spies could go on their way and rejoin the Israelite encampment. And the spies gave Rahab one more requirement in order to ensure the safety of her and her family. Said that all your family has to be gathered in your house, in this room. They can't be spread throughout the city. They all have to be in this one location. And we want you to mark the window that you're letting us go out with a crimson cord. And at that point, we'll know where it is that you are, and you'll be safe. And she agreed to their conditions, and the spies went on their way, and Rahab tied the scarlet cord to the window. I think often we believe that God uses people who have it all together. He only uses people who have arrived at a level of respectable faith. He only uses those who actually have their lives together. But as we look at this portrait of Rahab, we see that God uses someone that others would have looked down on. God uses someone that others would have shunned to accomplish his purposes. Is there something in your life that causes you to believe that God can't use you? Is there something in your life that you think, because of this, there's no way God could ever use me? Maybe the story of Rahab can give you a different perspective on the people that God uses to accomplish his purposes.